Great. Look, you're really welcome. Welcome to the English College. And I think for most of you it's your first time. And you're such a large group, I'm sorry not to get to know you all individually. So I won't go round the circle introducing yourselves, because you've probably done that 20 times this week. But you're very welcome. As you've heard, my name's Fr Stephen Wang. I'm the Rector here. And it's great to speak to you as a group of journalists and people in communications about seminary life in Rome, and just to help you get a good perspective on what that means. And I thought I'd break this down into three simple areas. One is the idea of a seminary in the first place. What in general are we trying to do? Secondly, what does it mean to be at a seminary in Rome? What's the pluses and the minuses, and just here we are in Rome. And thirdly, something about the Venerable English College, the uniqueness of where we are now, our history, and that will lead in then to some time for questions and then a tour of the college. So I hope we can fit that into the hour and a half that we've got. Okay, so first of all, the idea of seminary. And look, this isn't an academic history of the seminary system. It's off the cuff, writing down some notes to myself, but especially if you're not familiar with this strange world of seminary. The key word is formation. We are being formed for the Catholic priesthood, rather than just trained or educated. Yeah? Oh, the training of priests, the education of priests. That's part of it, but the key word is person, because we're trying, the Lord, the Church, are trying to form the person, not just to train someone to do certain things, to follow a certain career, to have certain skills. So yes, there are external skills and that we need to learn, but also there are inner virtues that we need to grow in. And also it's about our identity as men, as Christians, as brothers, as spiritual fathers. So it's that formation, growing into something, growing into a certain kind of person, a priest, growing into becoming, hopefully, like Jesus Christ. Now, all Christians are called to be like Jesus Christ, but for the priest to model him in a particular way as the head and shepherd. So that's the word formation. Lots of models of formation throughout 2,000 years of Christian history. Very often it was an apprenticeship model. In England and many European university towns, it was through the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. But especially after the Council of Trent in the second half of the 16th century, there was a more standardised model of what we now know as the seminary system. This was, Trent hoped that every diocese, in fact, would have a seminary, and it was true for many dioceses. This is a community where you live together, a community of faith, of prayer, of study, where you have examples and teachers and mentors, where you're formed by your peers, by your brothers, by the community around you. So there's a lot here about formation, but there's a model here of belonging, because there was a common Christian culture. You're very welcome. Come on in. Please take a seat. So the 16th century, let's just say again, I'm vastly oversimplifying, up to the mid-20th century, 400 years of seminary formation, and the model here of a common Catholic culture being taken for granted. So a young man came from a common Catholic culture, was formed in family, school and parish, entered a common Catholic culture of the seminary, and went back to a common Catholic culture of the parish, the school, the families he's working with, sometimes in almost like a ghetto, the Catholic ghetto, that part of the city or whatever, but whatever, a common Catholic culture. It often had a monastic feel to it, simply by the fact that it was an institution, a community, and it was often quite insular. No judgment here, that was what it was like. You were joining a clerical community, becoming part of a cadre of seminarians and priests, and you were stepping back into a familiar Catholic world, where your responsibilities and duties were taken for granted. You knew what they were, the community knew what they were, you slipped into them. Lots of this began changing in the mid to later 20th century, so our own times, mainly because of the Second Vatican Council, but not just because of that. Things were shifting anyway. A desire to have a greater engagement with the world, more emphasis on pastoral placements, that you're not just in this semi-monastic community learning how to be holy and wise and priestly, you're learning how to engage with people and work and serve others, and work not just for them, but to work with them. Greater involvement on the pastoral placements through the year, on the pastoral placements in the summer, the involvement of religious sisters and brothers and lay people in formation, and often training not just with your brother seminarians, but with others on a journey of formation, religious brothers and sisters, lay people. My sister did an STB, a theology degree, in the seminary in London 25 years ago, for example. Just one symbol of this shift from the monastic seminary to the more fluid, open seminary was the seminary in London, in Westminster Diocese, where I worked. It's called Allen Hall. We started in Douai in northern France as a missionary seminary, but for 200 years we'd been in the countryside, outside London, a little village called Ware, W-A-R-E. Really a monastery. Now you could walk to the pub, you could go and pray with the sisters round the corner, and you tried to have one or two pastoral placements, but it was very difficult. So in the mid-70s, Allen Hall moved from the countryside to Chelsea, which is right in the heart of London. And the two main reasons for that: first, so that the students could be thoroughly embedded in the diocese, in the city, could be going out to pastoral placements every week, twice a week, could be working in parishes, and people could be coming in to support the seminary, not just the priests who lived there. And secondly, it was so that we could study at Heathrop College, part of the University of London, sadly closed now, run by the Jesuits. So we went from the countryside to the city, from being pretty isolated to being in communion with the whole world, really the whole world in London, and from an internal course of studies to a course of studies in a Jesuit college, but in a secular university, as it were, working and studying with people from all over the world. A key moment in the vision and theology of formation was 1992, when Pope John Paul II wrote and issued a document called Pastores Darbo Vobis, based not just on his own thoughts, but on a consultation, on a synod, which was about priestly formation. So this is a post-synodal apostolic exhortation, and it brought together all the experience of seminary and the feeling of the post-Vatican II Church of what we needed. And there were two key visions there. One was to speak about the four dimensions of priestly formation. And look, you can apply this to your own lives as lay people as well, for every Christian and for every human person. The four areas that in the seminary and in every human life we need to focus on: human formation and development, spirituality, prayer and worship, intellectual formation, and pastoral formation. So Pope John Paul II saying we need to integrate all this and make sure that we're focusing on all four dimensions and not just one or two. Human dimension: how am I growing as a person? It's not just a skill, it's not just the head knowledge. It's me, it's my relationships, it's my love, it's my being. Who am I? Spiritual formation, relatively easy to understand. What's my faith? How am I growing in prayer, in worship, and in leading others in prayer? Intellectual formation, notice the word, not academic. academic formation is one part of intellectual. But intellectual is bigger. It's how we look at the world, how we speak, how we think. Yes, we go to study to do our academics, but I'm also thinking and reading and praying about life and faith. And fourthly, pastoral formation. It's the experience of going out to be on placements, going to hospitals, universities, prisons, schools, parishes in Rome, back home. It's the skills I'm learning. We had, this July, we had a week of communications and media classes. We had a week of leadership classes. What skills am I learning? So the 4 dimensions, but the key for John Paul II was pastoral charity. It's all a waste of time if I'm not able to love my brothers and sisters and to love with the heart of Jesus the Good Shepherd. So I can learn all these things, I can grow in all these ways, but the motive and the purpose and the unifying factor of everything is pastoral charity, is the love of Jesus Christ. I started seminary here in 1992, the month almost that Pastoris Dabo Vobis was printed and promulgated. So I was very formed by this as Monsignor Adrian Toffolo, my rector, was trying to get his head round it. And really we've had all those years since of really maturing as seminaries globally. And then just almost an update, the Ratio Fundamentalis of 2016. It's not a new Pastoris Dabo Vobis, but it's just bringing it together all these years later and underlining 1 or 2 things. This is from Pope Francis. Putting a new emphasis, as you'd expect, as you'd guess, on mission. We mustn't just be stuck in our Catholic bubble, in our Catholic parishes. That's to be a pastor. It's really important. But as well as pastors, we're called to be missionaries, to be outward looking, to not be just self-referential, is one of his favourite phrases. A shift from maintenance of the community and the institution to mission to the world. The danger of clericalism. Now, it's important to have a healthy clerical identity. I am a priest, not a layperson. We've got different roles, complementary roles, but distinct. But not clericalism, where I get caught up in a priestly bubble, when I'm not able to relate to other people, when I think I'm better than other people, when my culture is completely clerical and I don't understand the culture and the language and the needs of the people around me, and I'm not able to communicate with them. So this was the Ratio that came out 6 years ago, and look, we're working on this. We're working. How can we help our seminary to be more missionary, to be more open, to be more pastoral? One little thing in the seminary here, we're reconfiguring our team this summer for lots of different reasons, and we now have 2 members of staff working in the area of pastoral formation. A priest from England, Father David, and a sister from Italy, Sister Valentina. How fantastic. We've got a priest and a sister, a man and a woman, working together to form the men for their pastoral relationships. Okay. That's part 1, seminary. Part 2, okay, what's it mean to be in a seminary in Rome? Well, first of all of the above. Yes, we're not doing something different here. We're a seminary like a seminary in any part of the world, any continent, and we're on the same map, and we've got the same vision. But here in Rome, yes, there are dozens of seminaries, many like us going back to the 16th century, others more recent. There are national seminaries, the French College, the German College, the Brazilian College, the Mexican College, the Scots, the Irish, the NAC, the North American College, and here the Venerable English College. There are also religious orders forming men for priesthood, and there are different kinds of hybrid communities and lots of different variations. So it's a privilege to be here in Rome, and well, you're experiencing that this week, undoubtedly. But I often repeat, we are not an elite here. This is part of the dangerous fantasy in some people's minds. In Rome itself, unfortunately, and back in England and other countries, oh, you're special because you're going off to seminary in Rome. Well, you're not. We're not. Every seminary is unique. Every seminary has strengths and weaknesses. As I said, I'm not denying it's a great privilege to be here, but I worked in a seminary in London, my home diocese, Allen Hall, for 8 years as Dean of Studies. My heart is very much there as well as here, and I can tell you, you're very welcome. Come in. This seminary in Rome is not a better seminary than the one in London. They're both fantastic seminaries. They're both distinctive, and just for the record, the one in England is older than the one in Rome. Yeah, because we were founded in Douai in 1568, before we were exiled to England and then to London, and this seminary was founded 11 years later, and in fact we are an overflow college of Douai Seminary, because they got full up. So all seminaries have their own challenges, their own strengths. This is not an elite, it's not better to be in Rome, but it's distinctive. Okay, what's distinctive about being in Rome? Well, the city itself, the incredible history of this city, the experience of living and working here, of breathing the air, the beauty, the culture, the history. It is one of the most amazing cities to live in, isn't it? You know, just to walk around and to experience it. And we're part of that. We're immersed here for 5, 6, 7 years. Secondly, the experience of being part of the Catholic Church in Rome. And this has got two aspects. On the one hand, it's coming to the centre, the hub. So we have a feeling of being at the centre of the life of the Catholic Church here, in one sense. And that's, again, it's got strengths and weaknesses, and there's pluses and minuses about that. But we are here in Rome, the Mother Church. We are here near to the Vatican. We're not in the Vatican, we're near to the Vatican. But the other aspect of being part of the Catholic Church in Rome is that we see the decentralised church here. By being in Rome in the centre, you see the global universal church. You meet people from every part of the world, from every part of the church, in your university, in your seminary, in your relationships with the Vatican. So you're here in the midst of things, and it's beautiful and intense and historic, but you're also, I'm not just making this up, I do feel it deeply, you're also strangely going to the peripheries by being in Rome. The lay people and the sisters and the priests and the seminarians that our men study with at our 2 universities are from every corner of the globe and from every experience. They're not just from rich dioceses who can afford to send them here because they're subsidised and funded so often. They're not just the elite, the ones who are going on to further licence studies because they've got the qualities to do master's work here. They're here for ordinary formation in Rome as part of their seminaries and their religious orders. So it's an experience of the centralised church, the Vatican, and of the decentralised church. You're welcome. Come and take a seat. Just 2 examples. Well, I've given the first one of universality. One is the Pontifical Universities. Most seminaries use one of the big historic or the more recent Pontifical Universities in Rome, and they are it's the United Nations. It is the global Catholic Church. It's fantastic, and I hope you can visit them. The other example, just from 2 weeks ago, was the consistory that we had here for the new cardinals. We were part of a great celebration. We were here with the excitement of the visiting dignitaries and the colour and the parties, and yes, it's like being in La Dolce Vita and it's like a Fellini film, but on the other hand, that's an experience of the local churches, because each cardinal comes with his fans and his supporters and the priests and the laity and the religious from Korea with our new cardinal who's in charge of the dicastery for the clergy, from Nigeria. Lots of English here with Cardinal Arthur Roach. So you have this experience of richness and fun, as long as you don't take it too seriously, of being here in Rome. But another aspect for most seminarians of being in Rome is simply living abroad. Don't forget that. It's not just being in Rome. For us, from England and Norway and Canada, these guys probably wouldn't have lived abroad otherwise. They're sent by their bishop here. They have an experience of thinking in a different culture, living in a different place, making relationships, getting outside of their own national cultural bubble, and that's a good thing for many to have experienced. I wish more could have experienced it as well. So there are unique things about being in Rome. They're a great gift, but there are wonderful things about being in Korea and London and Buenos Aires, and I'm grateful to be here, but I'm also grateful that not all the seminaries of the Catholic Church are in Rome. Just on this section of Rome, let me say a little bit about what we're doing here, and then I'll come on to the VEC history, because in some ways I'm still speaking about seminaries in general rather than the VEC. The demographic of seminarians today, and you can ask more questions about this if you want. Interestingly, certainly here, and I think this is true more widely, the majority, still come from what I would call a traditional Catholic context. From a Catholic family, or at least a parent, a loving parish, a good Catholic school, maybe an experience at University of Chaplaincy. So a traditional Catholic vocation, meaning the culture and the family and the school and the parish have formed you. You've been living your faith as a teenager. You've been thinking about priesthood. You've had some good examples and encouragement. And I won't say it's easy or natural, but it was a clear option for you, and you've been well prepared for it in many ways to take the first step. And it's great that there are these traditional path vocations, because I think this should be, and probably will be, the majority of vocations. But of course we do have stories and individuals who've come by different routes. They're reverts. They had a faith, they lapsed, they've rediscovered it. They're converts. They come from another Christian communion, and they've grown gently and gradually into full communion with the Church. Or they're what I would call radical converts. They were living another religion, or a way of life, a secular way of life perhaps, completely at odds with Christianity, and something big has marked them, a moment of conversion, an encounter, a spiritual experience. Of course that's had to mature, and they've had to grow into Catholic life and faith and prayer and parish. But the convert vocations are a significant part of the seminary here, and of seminaries and of our parishes. But just to underline, sometimes you hear stories of, I was a drug user for 10 years and the Virgin Mary appeared to me and now I'm at seminary. And it's wonderful, really. And there's one or two people like that. But that's not the whole story, that's part of the story. And I think that the radical converts need the ordinary Catholic culture to sustain them. And we've got both. Everyone here has been touched by the Lord in some way. Obviously, a faith, but something that's taken them deeper, a desire to serve, a sense of calling. Remember, vocation means a call. It's not my plan, it's not my career. Something along the way has surprised these men. And you're a group of journalists, let me put it this way. Each of them, they've been living a certain story, a narrative. And they've realised that for themselves, there's a bigger story, a bigger narrative. That there is a God, that he loves them, that he sent his son, Jesus, to die for them, that he's offered us the gift of new life and the hope of heaven and life after death. They've discovered this for themselves, and then, this is the vocation to priesthood for them, They've discovered that they long to share that story with others and to bring people into a narrative, because so many people don't have a story. They don't have a narrative. They don't have any sense of meaning beyond the day-to-day. And I'm not judging them. Just God help us if we have nothing but the next plan, the next difficulty, the next problem, the next joy. Where's the eternal horizon? Where's the offer of hope and of meaning? And for the seminarians, they might not put it in the same way I've done, but something has touched their own lives and they want to share that story. They want to preach the gospel. They want to bring people into that way of life. So it's a radical calling. There are sacrifices. It's against the grain in so many ways, not just a life of celibacy, in so many other ways as well. The biggest challenge, I think, today is that it is a commitment for life. And that's uncommon today, even for those thinking about marriage. But they're not naive, and certainly one of the first things I say to them when they arrive to the first years is, don't think that you're the special person making sacrifices coming here. Yes? Do you know any married people? Seriously. Do you know the sacrifices it costs to marry, to love faithfully for 50 years, to bring up children today? Do you know the sacrifices and the challenges of being single today? Don't think that you're the tough guy coming here. You're not. It needs courage to live life. It needs courage to live the Christian life. Okay, so that's seminary in Rome. Part 3, the Venerable English College. And then we'll have a little stretch, time for some questions and a tour. We have a really, really unique history here. I'm very proud of the place, but it's an objective fact. It's not just because I'm standing here. We are the oldest English institution outside of England. And really our roots go back to the year about 700. Not directly, but indirectly, because in 700, before there was an England, England came later, when there were the Anglo-Saxon tribes in England newly Christianized because of Pope Gregory sending St. Augustine to England in 597, 100 years of faith and conversion. The links between the Anglo-Saxon tribes and England and Rome were very, very strong. We're one of the very few countries that was evangelized directly by Rome, by a pope. So we've always been the daughter of the Roman Church. So King Ine of Wessex in about 700 said, there was lots of travel already, we need a base in Rome. And he set up the first English hospice, meaning a hostel, a centre, a hotel, a hub, almost like an intellectual centre, a university almost. And the first English hospice was just about on the Via Conciliazione, up to St. Peter's. Some of you know the church of the Chiesa dello Santo Spirito in Sassia, the Church of the Holy Spirit.
We walked by it on the way to the CDF on Tuesday.
Yeah, so the Church of the Holy Spirit, it's the Church of the Holy Spirit in Sassia. That's what it's called. Can you hear the word? Of the Saxons, of the Anglo-Saxons. So that was where the first hospice was. And for centuries, the good and the great kings and queens and warriors and the intellectuals and ordinary pilgrims were coming from the Anglo-Saxon tribes and then from England, once it was unified, to the English hospice. We were the very first national hospice in Rome. It's not like there were 100 embassies or something. We invented this idea. Do you see the strength of the link between England and Rome and the global church? The hospice eventually, we don't know all the details, moved to Trastevere, across the river, and then our foundation in 1362, the hospice was refounded right here. And we've been a continual presence, a continual English institution from 1362 up to the present. I can't show you it now, there's not enough time, but in the archives we've got the foundational statutes from that year, and we've got the land documents from before. the land registry documents, as it were. The building just behind you here is the medieval hospice. It's the 14th century building. You saw a bar outside, Bar Peru. Yeah? The front door next to Bar Peru would have been the entrance into the 14th, 15th, 16th century hospice. Yes, yeah, I can show you that afterwards. This was set up by laymen, by lay people, by businessmen in Rome, because they wanted to help especially the poor who came to Rome on pilgrimage. It was a social enterprise, as we say today. Fantastic. Then, of course, the government, the crown and the clergy got in on the act, but it was a lay enterprise at the beginning. And it became a royal foundation. It became an incredible centre of life, of energy, of intellectual life. Thomas Lineker was one of my predecessors as the warden here. So many people have been through here. The late 15th century, it would have been a centre of humanist life. So much history to tell you. Of course, then, the crisis of the Reformation in England. Remember, for 30 years, no one, well, I won't say they didn't take it seriously, but everyone assumed in the 1530s and 40s, and even into the 50s, that we'd be back where we were. It'll be over soon. But by the Elizabethan settlement, of course, it was clear that England was no longer Catholic. And the great visionary was Cardinal William Allen, who said, we need a plan B. We can't just keep doing what we've always done. We need a plan B. And instead of waiting until we can form seminarians in England, remember by this stage, the 1560s, it was illegal to be a priest in England. It was illegal to be trained for the priesthood. At the cost of your life, it became treasonable. He said, well, we've lost Oxford and Cambridge as Catholics. Let's build an Oxbridge in France. So he built the English College in Douai, northern France. Why? Because it was under the protection of Spanish Flanders, because it was near to the port of Calais to get back to Dover, and third, because a new university had recently been set up in Douai. So fantastic circumstances. It became a school and a seminary, a training ground for priests, and immediately it became a centre for mission for England. It was so successful that 8 years later, started 1568, 1576, it was full, and Cardinal William Allen said, why don't we use the English hospice where you're sitting, because fewer pilgrims were coming because of the persecution. So a small group came here. They'd been established by 1579, and that's the foundation date of the English College as a pontifical seminary. We were founded by Pope Gregory XIII. We were magnificently endowed by him. If only I had the properties today as rector that we were given then, we would be swimming in it. But we lost them in the French takeover in the early 19th century. So we were well endowed financially. We had a fantastic location. We had the support of the Pope. We had the Catholic community behind us. And we had the Collegio Romano, the new Jesuit university, which is now the Gregorian University. So everything was set up. And for the first 100 years, we were a missionary college, unlike many seminaries. Do you see our uniqueness? We were founded for mission. Every young man here knew that he was here at the risk of his life. There were spies, English spies, parked on the Via di Monserrato outside the college because the men were here under aliases and they would try and track them back to England. When you came here, because of the danger of Protestant spies coming into the seminary, like communists in Eastern Germany going into the seminary system to be priests and bishops 30 years later, well-known and true stories, the seminarians here, they had to sign a missionary oath, and in our archives going back to 1579, we have 7 volumes of the Liber Ruber, the Red Book. It's called the Red Book because it's bound in red vellum, but then because it became the Book of Martyrdom. You had to sign the book promising that you were willing to go back on mission, even at the cost of your life. And the first name in that book is Saint Ralph Sherwin, who is our first martyr, who was martyred in 1581, with, just for the record, Edmund Campion, in case you know a bit more about him than you do about the English College. There are 7 volumes. Of course, when I came back as rector last year, first thing I did was went to find my own name in the Liber Ruber, and it was still there. So, this incredible tradition of martyrdom and mission, for more or less 100 years, we have 44 martyrs from our college, many canonised, most beatified, 1 or 2 venerable. And it was part of the life, part of the vision, part of the story, and part of the reason that the faith survived in England, despite the terrible persecutions of the late 16th and the 17th century, was because of the missionary colleges, and I must say, of course, not only our own. Yes, Douay, the Venerable English College, Valladolid in Spain, Madrid, Lisbon, 1 or 2 other places, a network of missionary colleges. What a vision Cardinal William Allen had. And just a lovely mistake people made. They say the Venerable English College. Oh, that's because of your martyrs, isn't it? No, we were called the Venerable English College by Pope Gregory XIII before we had any martyrs. Why were we called that? Because our history was so venerable. Because we'd already been here as a college for 200 years, and the history went back to the 8th century. So Gregory was acknowledging the links between England and Rome and the strength of the bonds between our 2 communities. Long story short, much more freedom obviously in the late 17th century into the 18th century, a fascinating history which I won't go into. We've been exiled a number of times, including when the French came in 1799, and of course during the Second World War. The miracle is that the college more or less has survived intact, that our archives have, that our relics have, and that our martyrs picture has, which I'll show you when we go downstairs. Today we are small. I hope it grows. When I came here in 92, there were 70 seminarians. Today we are 21, 11 from England and 10 from abroad. You can ask me a bit more about it. The typical rhythm of seminary life, which I've spoken about already, of community, of prayer, of meals, of study, of pastoral work. We do go at this time, for the last few years, to the Angelicum, the Dominican College, for the first 2 years of philosophy in English. So it gives us a bit of a transition period to learn Italian. And then in the 3rd year, we move to the Gregorian University, the Jesuit University, to study, by that stage in Italian, to do our theology. And that's been the pattern, and we're reviewing that, but we've got lots to think about and to see where to take that. So look, it's a blessing to be here. I'm delighted to be here as rector. We've got a fantastic community. You're here in our induction week. We've had 6 new men arrive. And we've had a fantastic week settling in, and they're great guys, and we're just looking forward, I won't say the old men, to the returners to coming back a week today. Next weekend, in 8 days' time, we're going off for a week of silent retreat in Frascati with Father Luigi from England to guide us in that retreat. And then the following Monday, we start in the chapel early morning, and we go off to university, and the real work begins. So I'm delighted to be here as rector, and it's lovely to have this time with you, and we can have some time for questions now.